anyway, for people who missed it, joined by Rain, who most of you know, fellow Factorio streamer, great content, and then also Factorio Dev V, and this is V's base, and it is a pile of spaghetti. It has a few key mods, of the primary one being a mod V made himself that basically allows most machines to have the ability as if they had beacons, max beacons, all around them, but it's built in. So it kind of eliminates the need for beacons and allows you to build much more compact and creatively. And then there's a few quality of life mods, I believe, which aren't as important. This is the most game-changing one.
Yep, that's it.
And yeah, so as Rain was saying, this is an absolute masterpiece of spaghetti. Do you man, is there somewhere you want me to like start looking, or you want to guide me around, V?
Well, it doesn't really matter where you look. I mean, obviously a good start is labs because everything ends up in there,
The labs,
and
okay.
then all the rest of the things are connected to it. But in general, it's a series of prepared blueprints. So all of the main production lines are actually from prepared blueprints that are trying to utilize direct insertion a lot, because obviously that's one of the things that beacons disallow. So I'm trying to abuse that as much as possible. And also, I've spent way too much time with the technical Factorio people who try to optimize the hell out of the UPS in Factorio. So they are all about, direct insertion, these things. And honestly, it's probably not too healthy to do this for having fun playing, but I've been trying to be kind of UPS conservative in some places so that I could actually afford to have this many belts and this much of a crazy factory. So the fact that we are still at above 60 UPS here is partially thanks to that. But yeah, so I made this mod because long term, as I tried to write in the Friday Facts, I felt like beacons are the thing that really restrict me or make the factory look more rectangular, and that's a lot of times dangerous. Now, when evaluating it, I think this base is a bit too of a mess in some degree. In some places, if I really zoom out and look at it, it's a bit too random. So beacons are nice that they actually give some structure in some cases, if used properly and not in the 12 beacon layouts. But yeah, so I made this mod and I wanted to try it. So I played 2 maps. This is actually the second one. The first one I played just briefly. Then I realized, oh yeah, the direct insertion is a thing. And I tried to build this map around that, basically. The idea was that I prepared these, 10 or something blueprints. And then I was just building around, and building more and more. And eventually I had this whole thing. So all of the science, if you can find some science, they're labeled on the map, so you can see them by the science spec potions there.
Oh
So
yeah,
usually each of the science specs is
there's a lot of
one
labels in the map.
blueprint.
there's a lot.
Yeah, they're usually something like 400 science per minute each. So there's usually about 7 or 8 of them per type.
Wow.
Which kind of actually gets repetitive to the degree. I was trying to break up this repetitiveness by flipping and rotating the blueprint sometimes. But as you can see here, there's 3 production signs built on top of each other.
I do see some patterns.
I abandoned the idea of trying to I didn't really try hard, but I abandoned the hope that this base could become an actual poster or something. I don't think that's the case. It's crazy and all, but visually it's not that interesting compared to the previous one, for example. It's a complicated matter, but yeah. So yeah, and then I just built and built and built, and I slapped things on top of each other, and eventually I got this.
Wow.
Which, yeah, it's just basically individual blueprints, and they produce things, and they take in usually raw ores, hence the direct insertion, because they try to do many steps, or obviously refinery products, or sometimes circuits, because from, as you both know probably, or everybody, that when you have a big base, you need a lot of modules. So I kind of knew that I will probably really want a dedicated circuit build, because I will need a lot of circuits for a lot of modules. So some of the science builds are fine with importing circuits from somewhere else in the base instead of crafting them themselves. Also because, not all of the direct insertion is actually possible, because sometimes the recipe gets so complex that there's just not so much space. So you need to import something.
I'm seeing some of
So-
these patterns, and I think they're really cool. I think you see some of these patterns repeated, but then from the first perspective, you see a lot of unique elements within, like, around those patterns. So you get the spaghetti
Yes.
surrounding each one, and then after you explore a little bit more, you start to see, okay, here's a little green circuit build. Okay, here's a little red circuit build.
Yes.
Okay, here's a train unloader. It's all very cool because you are seeing a lot of new stuff. There's a lot of unique stuff. I don't think it's just make a blueprint and copy it over and over again. There's a lot of variation here. It's very cool.
Yeah, tons of
that's
variation.
that's one of the important parts, that you look at the build, and even if you didn't see the icons or alt mode, you know which one it is because it's unique. And that part is really cool. And that's kind of what I'm going with when I'm saying that, like, when you have 12 beacon, or let's say 10 beacon for, let's say, green circuits, that layout looks the same between red and green and maybe even blue circuits, and like you can't tell if it's A, B, or C. Whereas here it's unique, and there's probably so many more ways how you could build it. Even if you restrict yourself to the direct insertions, and that's one of my favorite part about productivity, that it makes ratios go all over the place. So there's so many ways how to do it, because none of the ratios is going to be 100% perfect. You can get closer or further away from having all machines working at all times, but sometimes it's actually worth it to have the kind of seemingly less optimal layouts, or I just eyeball it more or less. Like, I did actually put it into the Factorio calculators, but still, it's like not all the direct insertion is easily possible. For example, for the advanced circuits, I think I'm using like 4.5 machines of advanced circuits per copper wire, which is by far not perfect, because it's like the perfect one is 8:1, right? With productivity. So yeah, but
Wow.
the fact that then it fits somehow into the stamping, and with the combination of how many machines you get per belt, or I don't know, if you're using robots, then that doesn't matter, or if you're using direct insertion to trains or some other methods. So there's a lot of variety that you can do. And I'm quite curious in what people are going to figure out with this mod that they would be interested in doing, because it changes things quite a lot. Even though the basics work the same, it's a very small change, but it really changes the end game and possible layouts by a large margin.
Oh yeah. One interesting thing I'm noticing, not necessarily build wise, but specific to this mod, is it seems like you can very easily get a much higher power consumption than you would anticipate, due to not needing beacons, because like this is what, like, this is a 2,500 science per minute base, it looks like
2.7, yeah.
2.7, and you have like 30 gigawatts of power consumption.
Wow.
Which is insane. And it's mostly these modded machines, and I think that's because you don't have, like, it's very deceiving, because you can fit such a high powered machine in a small space, since you're not using beacons, and it can just like put your power through the roof. So I was just blown away when I looked at this power. I was like, what is happening here?
Yeah, I think the numbers themselves should be quite accurate to, like, compared to 12 beacon layouts. But the thing is that, for example, when I have, I don't know, like where I'm standing, I have the shell production for artillery. And you can see that I have the blue assembling machines there, which means that every one of them is the 12 beacon layout with full speed modules. And now they're not running, but they're still taking the train. So, like, even when I place down these beacon machines for random stuff that actually isn't producing all the time, it's still taking the train. So, yeah, normally you probably wouldn't do that in a normal base. So this motivates to use the beacon things even more, because you just upgrade them this way. So that probably contributes a lot as well. But I don't actually know. I didn't really built this large of a factory before, but I know that the last one that I did, that was at 1.4, I think it had about half of the energy consumption. So it's not that far off. So I would say it's roughly functioning as it should be. It's just, yeah, it's producing a lot of things and there's a lot of terrain.
Yeah, this is. Whew. I'm so lost right now.
So over here, Xterminator, just to the west, I think we walked past it. This looks to me like a mall. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the make
question
everything
mark?
area.
This
Yes.
is a make everything. All right.
Yes.
So I've never seen a make everything like this.
No.
And I want to highlight, if you walk a little bit further west, I saw this. There's a rocket silo. There's a rocket silo assembler.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And a rocket silo, beaconed rocket silo assembler, as well as a beaconed rocket silo 2 assembler. So
Mhm.
this is crazy. Everything is automated in this.
Actually, not
Somehow the
everything. My
resources-
last base was much better at this. And in fact,
Ah.
a lot of things in here, as you can see, are actually using requester chests, which I consider heresy in terms of make everything. Because, like, for the simple reason that, as you can see, this part of the factory is very interesting and very unique. And with logistic robots, it generally gets less interesting and unique. But I guess I thought that it's already interesting and unique enough, and I can get away with using some robots at this stage. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
No, for a vast majority of this stuff, there's no. I don't see any requester chests. So
Yeah,
No.
it's
for
rare.
your inserters, for your boxes, for your miners, maybe even.
Mhm.
It looks like there's a lot of direct insertion from just electric furnaces right into them. So you're actually making iron,
Yes.
direct inserting it right into the inserter assembler. This is crazy. This is crazy. That's a whole nother level.
Yeah, that's what the mod allows.
Yeah, this is insane. This is a really creative mod. Like, I'm surprised no one's made it before now, because especially for megabasers, I think this is a huge innovation. To be
I was
able to do
surprised
this.
as well, and that's basically I had the balls to actually put it in a Friday effect, because honestly, like, officially for Factorio, it's not something like, it's not a new development. It's like, sure, the research that I did on beacons, are they worth it and stuff. It's cool to know that, yeah, okay, we're keeping beacons for reasons A, B, and C, and this mod at the same time isn't anything that official that we're actually going to use. But I believe for long-term people who play Factorio, this is quite an interesting spin-off that really behaves the same way in general, but it changes so many things.
Yeah, it changes so much, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the general base, and then obviously, I don't know if you know, but the last base use this as well. My train system is basically trying to be the whole across the map distributed. Any train can go anywhere, and every resource has post stations of the same name. So, for example, any iron ore train can go to any iron ore outpost, and then it can drop iron ore in the main base in any of the iron ore drop-offs. So it's like, it's trying to just dynamically balance itself, and the trains are finding the drop-offs and pickup stations based on demand.
Mm-hmm.
And the main thing that drives this is, for example, as you can see here, there is this is like the stacker, and when trains are in the waiting base, so when the lamps are turned red, that means that the signal is actually locked by a circuit network, and that adds a really large pathfinder penalty to the other trains on the map. So basically, trains are constantly trying to repath.
It's dangerous out there. Apparently, V didn't warn us that you're apt to get run over.
Well,
yeah, I
I
can't
told
believe
you to get a lot of shield.
I can't believe you died before I did.
It's one of the reasons why I have the power up mod in there, because, yeah, this can happen, and it does happen all the time. Because when you have trains running inside of the factory and with quite high density, because, yeah, there's stuff being consumed, and this happens all the time. But yeah, this is the general idea of the train system, and I think that's a really nice part. Obviously, it's really weird, like having all these long waiting bays and basically turning the base into a parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
But it works really nicely. It's really convenient and comfortable to work with. Because if I go outposting, I don't need to bring trains. I don't need to do anything. I just connect the mine, and within seconds, it will actually get trains. It's incredible.
This is really impressive.
Yeah, and then with the drop-offs at the base, it's like I generally have a waypoint first, so the trains need to go to the waypoint, which is usually the bigger stacker, and then they actually get inside of the base. This is to control them a bit better than if I just let them get into the base directly.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it looks like you're just using pure vanilla circuitry for this train controller setup,
Yes.
which is very impressive. This is beyond my knowledge, but
Oh,
it
it's
looks
very
like it
simple.
works.
It's very, very basic. I don't really understand combinators and circuitry that well compared to many other people, but this is very basic. Like it's all based on the single waiting bay just locking itself, and that's it. Like the rest is just solved by the pathfinder.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's the great part, because when I see, for example, Rain's system, I'm like, holy hell! Like I don't understand this at all, because the circuitry there is so complicated. Like determining how many trains are on the way, how many are in the stackers, and then I think there's some limitations, right? You can only send it drop off or
There's
multiple.
always
Yeah.
limitations.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Well, in this case, there's basically none. I can send as many drop-offs as I want. The only limitation/requirement is that I need these parking lot things.
Wow. I'm blown away.
And
This
then
is
yeah, and then this links to the mines. So as you can see, I have direct mining into trains. And with the beaconed machines, this is a bit easier because obviously you can fit more of them.
mm-hmm.
But then I made the mod somewhat reasonable in terms of the miner actually works as if it had 3 speed modules inside of it, which is quite standard. And
Yep.
4 beacons for each. So it would mean that you would have like 1 row of beacons, 1 row of miners, 1 row of beacons, 1 row of miners, which is not that crazy yet. Like making 12 beacon miners, like nobody does that. That's a bit too far.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. That is definitely fair. Just sticking 1 row between them. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So that felt decent enough, and at the same time, like if you get the productivity bonus, then eventually it's fine. And even at the starting parts of the game, when I just didn't have any bonuses or even the beaconed miners, you just make more outposts, and with this train system, that's completely fine because it just adapts itself. And the key part there is the circuitry next to it. I actually did some original version, which was really clunky, but it functioned. And then Alison helped me to figure out this new one. So basically what it does is that it reads what amount of cargo does the train leave the station with. And if the train leaves without full cargo, then the station locks itself forever and it never unlocks. Because the train failed to load, and that means that some of the patches for one wagon are depleted. So it's not worth it for me to actually have empty trains coming into the base. This was actually one of the major issues originally, because I was trying to detect at first if the train has any cargo, and for quite a while it was happening that trains would arrive with just 1 wagon, and it just became too inefficient in terms of train traffic, because the base is really at the limit in terms of train traffic in a lot of places. Right now it actually doesn't seem so. It seems to have balanced quite well. I have expanded a lot of rails recently, but yeah, that's one of the locked stations.
Yeah, this is really cool. I really like this because a lot of times you'll see players advertise their base and talk about getting ore into their trains using direct miner to trains. And with high mining productivity, that works really well. But on a standard map, and I believe this is default settings,
Yes,
you end up with the issue of your ore goes away, and then you start you start running into actual legitimate problems. And this is a solution to that, which is really cool. And I think you saw it on the stream. There's the rightmost one disabled itself and said, look, this is just no longer applicable. And then you leave this really nice patch with all sorts of ore just scattered all over the place, which I consider heresy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel good about that, I must admit, but it's a thing that kind of has to happen with this.
Yeah, but it's a very cool solution. So I've never seen anything like this before. I haven't seen anyone kind of capture that, and I want to give you some credit for it because that's a really neat solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is that at the start, when because I don't really know like the circuitry that well, so I had a very crude solution, but it was a cool solution too. And it was that every train in the ending wagon, in the first wagon next to the locomotive, it had one nuclear fuel in its inventory. And when it arrived to the station, it would unload the nuclear fuel as a token, and the station would keep the token, and it would allow the things to go back only after a few seconds. Which means that if the train failed to load anything, it already left, and this token remained at the station while the train is gone. And then I would detect, okay, is the train gone, and is the token left in the station? If yes, then lock station forever. And it was really cool, but it was so inefficient, and it didn't actually do it properly because it detected the train was less than 8,000 last time.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
you know, it's a shame, but it was really cool. It was really creative.
Man, this is so. I think people are wondering because I've seen people talk about this for themselves. Do you have like rules you impose on yourself to force yourself to build spaghetti like this, or does this just happen naturally for you?
Not really rules, I would say. Like, sure, I don't deconstruct large areas. I don't replace the base for logistic robots, but in general, it just makes sense because you're trying to improve production, and there's no reason why I should tear it down if I can route more things through. And spoilers, I mean, you can always route things through because honestly, the underground belts are one of the most insane entities in this game. Because even if you feel like you can't get anything through, you almost always can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Wow.
And you do
So
have extra length on these, right?
yes,
I
but
hadn't
that's
seen that.
mostly I have the extra length on the red and yellows to be the same as the blues,
Hmm.
simply because I was using the blueprints that were like compatible for late game, but I needed to make them compatible from the game start.
Okay.
So that's why there's
No.
the main reason. Obviously, I'm abusing it. There's probably a lot of yellow and red belts all over the place that are extending to the full length. But I never used the belt braiding so that I could actually just upgrade everything and it would still work.
Mhm.
So there is not really any difference. It's just all of them could be blue, but I like the visual difference. Some of them actually are different color. I prefer to keep it this way.
This is. I mean, so I'm curious.
But yeah, but if I can go back to your question about the rules, I know that a
Yeah.
lot of people, when they're trying to build spaghetti, they're like, "Oh, I can't remove any structure. Everything has to stay exactly the same way." And to a degree, I mean, sure, yeah, okay, you can do it that way, but it's making it a lot more difficult. Because, for example, I replaced like a whole sections of the factory. I don't know. I
Mhm.
had a nuclear reactor, for example, here where I'm standing. I think so here, and then I was like, okay, I need more production for something, and then I replaced it with some other things. So definitely, I don't have like very strict rules for myself to really like no, you can't. It's just I don't feel like removing things because if I'm removing things, I would feel like moving backwards. Because as I wrote in the Friday Effects, and as I've said many times, I really like if the base looks more complicated and more difficult over time, and that's what makes me interested in continuing playing. And if I suddenly deconstructed half of it and replaced it with something clean and more efficient, it's not really enjoyable for me, at least. So just being able to build on top instead is the main philosophy, but that doesn't really mean that I have like strict limits. So yeah, that's that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. It's just interesting. I find this really intriguing that this is a natural way for you to build. Because like I don't know about you, Rain, but for me, it's so hard to not just build a bus from the get go. And it's just like I have to actively force myself to attempt to build this way, and I don't know. It's just really intriguing to me. I think it's really cool that you can just kind of naturally end up with this result.
Well, systematically, my factory is also a bus, technically speaking. It's just it doesn't look like one.
It's a
But
really, really long, curvy bus.
Yeah.
yeah, technically yes. And then there's like multiple buses, and then they can exchange resources in some cases. But in general, systematically, that's the same thing.
I'm with Xterm. I find it hard.
Mhm.
I have my style of how I like to approach things. I like to jump into some of the logistics spots pretty early. There's
Yeah.
these things I like and keeping it clean. And one of my favorite things to do is actually clean up old builds and remove them. Like my deconstruction tool is where I get the most joy in my base.
Yeah.
So something like this is I really want to just grab this deconstruction tool in the upper right and just go to town right now. It's like I don't think this
Yeah.
is needed. I don't think this is
Yeah.
needed.
I
However,
know,
I've not
that a lot of
identified.
people feel like this, yes, and I think
Yeah.
that's completely fine. That's yeah.
I have not
In-
identified yet a belt that wasn't actually used. So I don't know how you did it, but every single one of these seems to go somewhere and it's being consumed. Every
Oh yeah,
single
sure.
Yeah, it's
Well,
ridiculous.
a big part of this, and actually what really helps, and that's what I hoped for when I was starting this map, was that since I'm using basically the same resource all over the place, like all of it is raw ore is the main thing, and then there's like a few extras. So it's not using that many items, and that means that you can kind of redistribute them between builds, for example. So if some blueprint takes, I don't know, 2.5 belts, you still have a half belt to spare or something similar. So I was doing this quite frequently. I just rerouted things between one another.
Mhm.
A good example is like the whole top left part of the base with like the circuits is basically just for the tier 3 modules. And in the late stages, as I wasn't expanding as rapidly, so I didn't actually need that many modules, I just rerouted it to science. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on. And that's a big part of why so much of the factory is actually moving, because most of the train drop-offs are actually active, most of the builds are actually doing something, even if not like at full speed, all of them, then there's at least something happening.
For sure.
Except the mall, because the mall obviously that has no job at the moment, because things are already built.
Yeah.
Have you run into any, let's say, bottlenecks or problems that you had to face in this map as you were building it through? So,
Oh, sure, yeah.
major things. Can you go through a story on one of those?
Yeah, well, the first one was that building your whole blueprints like this, because obviously I had the blueprints prepared, and they are like late game oriented, so they assume the productivity, they assume some speed of the machines and stuff. And in early game, that was a pain because I had to had so many of them because they were very slow. So obviously, in this scale that the factory is right now, it was still minuscule. But I needed a lot of things compared to like a standard playthrough. It was much slower. So that was the first thing probably.
Mm-hmm.
The second one was definitely the train system, because like right now I have 4 rails or 2 rails in each direction inside of the main base quite often. But that was a pain to set up as well, and it's really like organic because the rails are trying to be solved in a very small footprint, and yeah, that was really difficult. Like the rails, the throughput of them, I actually started to reach the limits in there, and I still like trains are stopping and stuff. So that was really difficult. And then there wasn't too much else, not something very specific. The refinery is definitely not a great solution that I made, because I was kind of naively hoping that if I do the ratios well enough, that I will be fine with like a universal factory module for refinery. Oh, guess what? That was totally not the case. First of all, because the ratios changed. Because I've been playing this map for 1 year actually, Like I
Wow.
have about 140 hours on it, but I started in the beginning of 2019 because
Wait,
I
you
just
did this in 140
That's
hours?
so impressive. Oh my god.
yeah. I was preparing the blueprints for about 30 to 40 hours, but then the building actually itself, it's 140.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, I mean, you did your 5,000 mega base in 200, so come on. You're not that far off.
That's different. That's very structured and
Yeah.
it
Yes,
had a
yes.
lot of
I
planned
know.
out to it. It's organized. It would
I
take
know.
me 140 hours to make one change to one belt in this factory because I wouldn't even
Yeah.
know where, like, what's the impact of rerouting an iron here, adding a splitter. I'd have to know. Like, I would not be able to
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. Well, it's actually not that complicated. I just look at the belt, and if it's not moving too quickly, it means that it's not reaching the throughput. So it means that you can actually split it off somewhere else. My decisions are as complicated as this. You look, you see, you do. Very basic.
Wow. I wish my bases worked that simply. Oh wow. Wow. This is.
Yeah. Other than that, I didn't have terrible much of issues. For the first time, I actually built a big base on nuclear only, and I must say it was very enjoyable. Like
Hmm.
I calculated that I would need about 750,000 solar panels to replace this, so probably a million to be safe.
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
And honestly, it's like, oh,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
Yeah, that's
so
I
much, isn't it?
I do have nice blueprints that build themselves and just get delivered by trains, but still, the amount of times that you need to click to plot down the blueprint and the landfill under them and clear the area with the artillery and stuff, it takes a while. And like here, I just plopped them down into two lakes, and it took me a few hours, and then it just built itself by the delivery from trains. And it was
Mhm.
quite enjoyable. It was quite nice. The other thing that I really love is the artillery outposts. You can see them all over the edges of the map. That's basically how I obviously claim land and also scout for resources. Because once you get enough of the upgrade for the range, they just get so useful.
Yeah, you can
And I
basically just
basically
explore
never,
them.
yeah. Also, it keeps the biters outside of the pollution cloud somewhere, not everywhere. But it's just so nice, and I don't even need to use the manual which again, I don't want to do manual things if I can spend the time on the main factory then. So, and this was one of the reasons why I really thought about you, Rain, because when I saw your video about your 5k signs per minute pace, I feel like a lot of your philosophy is the same in this regard. Like if you can automate it, like have the logistic train network, however you call it, a train system, and
Yeah.
the other things that if you can automate these things, and in my opinion, that's the tutorial, because that's really cool. Because then you spend insane amount of hours actually designing the complicated. Just by the way, you can see that the train that we're on is trying to go around in circles and stuff. That happens. Like that's actually very
I
common.
I saw that.
Yeah. So yeah, in general, like for example, a lot of people say that nuclear is more interesting than solar because you plop down solar and you forget about it. But the fact that you actually have to design the delivery, the production, then the way how the trains actually deliver stuff when the train stations disable themselves, the way how to load the station efficiently, because even if you're using some basic combinators, it can still be quite complicated. And that's the interesting part. Like, sure, when you actually build it and when it's there and it just works, like that's the great reward, sure. But the things that it entails are actually very interesting. Whereas nuclear, it's like fairly possible that you just load all the items on the train once manually. You just build it and it's there because it has so much power output that it will probably be enough. I mean, obviously, if you go past some scale, then you will probably want to automate delivery as well. But for the solar panels, it's basically mandatory at any scale.
Yeah. And that is one of the things I love about Factoria is it has like 9 layers of depth of interesting
Yes.
things that you can do in the games. So your
Yeah.
ninth time through,
Yeah.
you can do things you didn't do your eighth.
Yeah,
Very much
exactly.
so. Yes. Yeah. For example, the artillery outposts here are the same thing. Like if they are out of shells, then they call a train, then automatically the train comes, it clears the area, and so on and so on. And then they take care of the wall, similarly to your outposts when they repair, your mining outposts repair the nearby wall. That's a similar principle.
Yeah.
Actually, in my last map, I had a similar system to yours, although much, much more basic, because my combinators are just not nearly as good as yours. But I also had like each outpost on the map had like its own delivery place, and I could just plop down the blueprints, and then the whole production cell would build itself basically remotely.
Yeah,
And
isn't that
on this
cool?
map, yeah, it's amazing. The feeling of that you do that is incredible. And obviously, you spend a lot of time designing it, and once it actually works, it's amazing. And then you can attach all the trash systems and all the things on top of it to make it really cool. And then you add colorful lamps to see the states. And then you discover that they actually have no idea how it works after a month. It's amazing. But what was I about to say? Something stupid. I don't know.
You were automating in a
Oh,
previous
yeah.
game the delivery of parts to the various
Yeah.
outposts. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's a common thing that people like to approach. In fact,
Yes, but unfortunately on this map I didn't need that because, well, everything is the part of the central base, so I didn't really need to deliver resources elsewhere. So just the artillery here at least, but other than that, not so much.
Do you happen to know a rough number of how many trains you have running on this map?
No, I don't. I didn't count them.
I just see so many. I would say probably 200
I would guess
maybe.
like 300, something
300,
like
yeah.
200 maybe, something. It's a few hundred, I don't know. It doesn't honestly matter, and the number is very deceiving because are stopped, parked waiting somewhere for something in some waiting base. So it would be quite easy to add another 100 and be like, yeah, I have more trains, but actually you just have more trains parking.
Yeah, I mean that's very true.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Kind of the throughput of the base kind of is the overtime number, and that I guess you could probably calculate how many trains are actually running because they are all on the basic resource. So if you took all the production of the base and then, for example, you can see that there is 100,000 iron ore per minute. So there is each train has 8K, so there is 12 trains per minute of iron ore. Then it could go next to the copper. That's probably more representative as a number than the number of trains. But yeah, there is a lot of.
Yeah.
The next time when I play, I'm not sure if I will exact same train system again. It's it's cool, but at the same time, the huge parking lots feel a bit too weird.
I like how they're unique though. Every single one, because it has to be so big, and it looks like you ran out of room. You start covering different rails with them, and you get creative.
Yeah.
I'll pick this portion of it here. I need, and they also look like sausage links. So
yes,
yeah, that too.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think they're cool for sure. They're different, but building them you need to take thousands of rails everywhere with you. It takes a while. Yeah, but it's fine.
True.
I have the many personal robot parts because again I have power armor, so building doesn't take that long. Like these large segments, that really helps, and with all the robot worker robot speed upgrades and stuff, it's actually pretty nice. But yeah, it still takes a while. But I was thinking about some system, like for example, sure I would have, let's say, 2 waiting bays. And then if the station has 2 trains waiting, then it kind of declares, okay, this is a lot, and it diverts trains to some centralized parking lot. But I'm afraid that there would be so much repathing that there would be so many trains actually going to the centralized parking lot that the throughput that the parking lot would need would be just way too high. So this is probably a lot more practical to have it really distributed and just well, trains have to travel a few hundred tiles each time.
yeah,
it's actually worth it.
If they go in circles like we saw, you're just using your rail network as a pseudo parking lot.
Yes,
don't get
pretty
off
much,
the ride.
but...
Stay on the ride. There's no room to get off the ride.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're quite significantly reducing your throughput of the network because obviously you have more trains running in more places than they actually need to be. So this is by no means perfectly efficient, but it's functional and it's really fun to build with.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
It's very efficient actually. I would say due to the fact that your factory, your main area where all of these resources are consumed, is so tight and so small, you have to fit all those trains in that tight little spot. It's a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
trains. Whereas some of the other bases that maybe me and Xterm have done is we kind of spread that out. I know Xterm has done a lot of mega basing with like the town style, where you have bases, very spread out. It gives your trains a lot more breathing room. So you've actually just got them in this really enclosed, like, I don't
Yes.
know
Yes.
how to describe it, just like tiny little area, and they're functioning.
Very
Yeah, that
well
was one
too.
of the
Yeah.
things. Yeah, with my last base, that was kind of one of the things that I regretted a bit because I used basically the city blocks, and there's no way that you're reaching the throughput limits of the city blocks style base, right? As it just distributes so much, like there's just no way. And I was kind of missing it because it's really nice to be able to fix the bottlenecks of the train junctions and have all the hell of trains stopping everywhere happen. So it's really cool. So this time I deliberately did it this way. And like sure, over time, for example, you can see here that this whole stacker, originally it was actually connected to the rails on the right, but eventually I just connected it on the left
Oh
because
yeah.
so that trains go from the less dense area, because if they would go from the right, the traffic would just be too high. So there are some ways that I'm actually like outsourcing traffic over time to elsewhere. But yeah, there's still a lot of trains in the middle. Although I have even like penalty stations in the center, like here, so that you don't get the trains to pass through it if they don't really need to. So if
Can you ping the ground next to it?
oh yeah, well,
Because we pull up
currently
the
I
train
can.
stop when you click
Yeah.
that.
Just good. I can see that it links the train stop. It's because when you see it from the map, it highlights the train stop as if it's being selected. But for example, here, yeah, like you can find them all in inner loop of the factory, or like here, you can see that there's train stops that try to divert trains so that if they can, they will try to take different routes.
Oh,
Which,
so the little pathing penalties.
yes, exactly.
Interesting.
Because with all of the trains repathing all the time, because of the penalties very quickly dynamically changing between different mining outposts or even drop-offs, it means that like I would get a lot of traffic inside just from these trains that are trying to repath, and it was also quite problematic. So in general, they're trying to leave the central cluster as soon as possible, and then they try to go through the junctions on the outside of the outer ring. So it's like if you have a city, you have a city center, and you're trying to make all the cars to some, highway type of roads. It's a very, very similar idea.
Right. That makes sense. That's a really, really interesting approach. I like it a lot.
Yeah. By the way, one of the silly constructions on this map is this. This is the artillery filling place. Here the artillery fills. And it was because at that time I didn't know the combinators to actually fill the train reliably. Now I do because I saw Rain's great logistics system, and it's amazing. The elegant solution of removing the items from the wagon if there's too many of them is amazing. So I had this system where the train basically has two stations. It checks for each item in each of the stations, and only if it's full in both, then it can leave to the artillery outpost. However, if the artillery outpost is disabled, the train just cycles back and forth between those two stations.
This is hilarious.
Dancing train.
Which, yeah, it's not the most efficient thing. Functions an artifact of, the knowledge that I had earlier, things that I didn't know. So I just didn't really want to replace it with the newer thing because it functions. The throughput is high enough to be able to service all the stations on the map. So it's like, yeah, okay, you stay.
I like that approach. If it's good enough, don't change it. That speaks volumes to how this space got to be where it is.
Yeah.
Just
This
don't move it.
specific thing really is irrelevant. Yeah, in general, if it's, don't touch it.
Wow, this is
I can see on the left of you, Xterminator, or both of all three of us right now. There's like these pumps.
Yeah.
These actually led to a nuclear reactor that was probably somewhere here. But then I just destroyed the nuclear reactor and replaced it with this
Oil.
plastic
Yeah.
refinery. So that's also what was happening very often. For example, the pumps got repurposed for something else.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you removed the destination they went to, but instead of just tearing them all up like I would have done, you just repurposed them, which is really smart.
Well, it was handy because it's quite work to set them up. I mean, if you go
Yeah.
all the way to the shore, like there's so many pumps, and then you have to go through the base with them, and they're quite large in footprint, like the 4x4 tiles basically of the undergrounds and the pump. Then you have to go with them through all the other stuff in factory. It takes some effort, like that's a lot. So being able to reuse them is quite valuable because you just don't have to do it again.
Yeah. And pipe spaghetti is the worst spaghetti.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
I
the
like
absolute
pipes
most.
personally.
Oh.
I like pipes. I just don't feel great about the fact that you can't walk through them. So inevitably, my builds become just a mess because I just navigate in it. But yeah, it's fine. But the general idea is like pipes can't connect to one another and they work a bit differently than belts. I like that part a lot.
Yes, I like the variation as well. I'm a big fan.
Mm-hmm.
They're more challenging, and when I complain about something, generally some part of me, deep down inside, appreciates the fact that it's challenging in its own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want it easier, even though I do want it easier.
Yes. By the way, this is the first red circuit build where we're standing now.
The very
This is the
first
first
one.
one that existed. Yes. And
So
the first
we're
refinery under it.
so you built this as like your first red circuits back in the blue science days.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. All of the like builds that you see in here are basically that way from the start, and that's kind of a part of the point of this playthrough. I kind of try to hint to it in the Imager album, where I had these pre-prepared blueprints so that I place them in the early game, and I know that in the late game they will be like ratioed really well. So in the early game, it's like, okay, the ratio is all over the place because you don't have the productivity and you don't have the faster machines yet. But I knew that, okay, for example, this build is eventually going to do 2 belts of red circuit. Assuming that I can feed it, which, yeah. And that's kind of the case with most of the builds in here.
So now that you've made this base and you've made a variety of different types of these bases, would you recommend to others to do what you did in terms of
That's a good
getting
question.
together some blueprints and some strategy before you even started? Or do you think going forward you would recommend with just start and experiment?
And just dive into it.
Honestly, the fact that I prepared the blueprints while it was fun and trying to exploit the mod in the direct insertion idea, I don't think it's actually something that was really that great in the playthrough. Like, sure, in the late stages, it's nice that you can just plop down a blueprint for science and then have it, like, just connect the inputs of the ores and stuff, which I, again, have, like, blueprints for the station, so sure, that's the typical end game. But in the starting stage, as I told you earlier, they were quite inefficient. And the fact that they are, like, even though it's cool to recognize these patterns, it's not something that I'm really that proud of. I would rather have a more organic base, even including these things, I think. So I would probably not recommend this in terms of, like, outcome, but sure, like, it was fun and it was different for once. So yeah, why not?
Okay.
Fair enough.
And it was really fun to figure out some of the builds. Like with the rocket silo, I was going quite crazy. I had like 3 cargo wagons that were on rails, and some of them were diagonal. I think 3, because that way you can fit more directly insertion machines onto them. But then I was like, yeah, okay, the rocket part so rich in density and resources, and there's not so many of them that it's not worth it to try to make a direct insertion for these. So instead, I make the direct insertion, for example, blades and the iron stuff for the low density structures, and then just belt them in. But yeah, there were some variations, and I'm quite curious if anybody tries to do something similar that I did here, what kind of direct insertion blueprints are they figuring? Because I'm quite sure that they would be wildly different than I have here, because there's so many possibilities.
Yeah, nearly endless possibilities.
And also sometimes, especially with the more simpler piece like the electronic kits, this is actually quite solid solution, and it's going to be quite difficult to actually find something that's significantly better regarding this specific mod. But yeah, there's definitely some ways.
What is?
If you put that out there. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Exterminator.
Oh no, it's someone in chat was just asking what this light counter is you're standing by.
Oh, yeah. As I was saying, I spent way too much time with people from the technical Factorio guys, the UPS maniacs. So I was basically trying to clock inserter for the steel. I don't think.
Okay.
Oh, actually, it still works above us. And this is the last build that still has it. I removed it from the others. But basically, I was trying to save some UPS. I was trying to time some inserters, and I also found it cool that you can control inserters like this. But I think this build actually suffers from it, because then there is a time when the first assembler for rails doesn't have steel coming in. It's going to happen now. Yeah, I can see now this one is stuck for a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was trying to do that, but then I removed it. But maybe I could have kept it and just messed with the numbers a bit more. But yeah, I don't need UPS that desperately. And then I left the counters in there. So
This is really cool. Yeah, clocking inserters is a pretty interesting concept if you can get it to work.
like if it was less organic, and if maybe it was like 2 lanes of steel trying to go into each other, and then maybe with like 2 different clocks that would be offset, so that I would basically make sure that I have some steel coming out at all times, then I think it would work pretty fine. But I just didn't really need it, so I didn't commit to it enough. If I really needed it, then I'm sure there will be some solution.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, so what were you gonna say, Rain? Before
I forgot, actually. I totally forgot. It wasn't that important.
Wow, this is I'm still like finding things I haven't seen before as I explore around here. A little green science section way over here on the outskirt.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just didn't have enough of it for green science limit for a long time. But that's also because like the blueprints that I have for sciences, like they are around 380 to 400 science per minute, but they're not like perfectly the same, all of them, obviously, because productivity and all the science spec crafting times are different. So sure, they can't be the same, but when you plop down 8 of them, then the differences really start to show. So sometimes I was just building extensions so that I make sure that I keep the labs working at all times.
Yeah, for sure.
And now it doesn't really happen that often, but in the early stages of the map, sometimes some of the iron or resource drop-offs didn't actually get the resources in time. So it was generally necessary to overbuild a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it
Yeah.
was like it was not this well polished from many sides. Like I was basically, the base didn't really change that much in the last, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 hours. But I just added a lot of rails, added some outposts for trains, added some trains, and just rerouted some resources to just make sure that everything worked. And for the last few hours, I've really kept the science running at max. I think when I left the save running just on my computer, just by itself, I think 3.5 hours, it was still running perfectly smooth for all the sciences. If you check out the 10-hour graph, you can see that it wasn't this smooth 10 hours ago at all.
Mm-mm. No, it's really pretty
No.
steady.
Yeah, but if you filter out science, then you can see that it was quite a wild ride. especially if you filter the consumption, because there you can see actually how much science per minute is. Then you're able to see that in the last 10 hours I had like 5 hours by some huge dip down, and then there was some others. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Yep.
Yes. So you can see that this result has actually been there for the last few hours, and I think it's going to stay as long as the resource outposts are not going to die off, which actually is going to happen quite soon because it just consumes stuff quite rapidly.
Oh, yeah.
How many outposts do you think you have?
I
can't
idea.
count.
I have no idea.
50s, 100.
Not 100. I wouldn't say that. I think it's not that many.
I'd say 50 or
say,
60, maybe.
I would say actually more like 20-ish per resource. Maybe 10-ish. I mean, some of them are actually disabled already. I'm not sure. But now that I'm like scrolling the map, yeah, it's a bunch.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
You're if you zoom all the way out, you have a lot of territory, and I see a lot of little zigzags around, and the zigzags are always an outpost, right?
Yes. Yeah, but the thing that it's like all automated, that they just handle themselves. You really don't count them. In this regard, it's quite dangerous because you lose track of how many you have, as you can see. One of the interesting ones was oil, that I haven't extended oil that much for quite a while. So it just drops down to the minimum rate, and then you just don't really need to add outposts that often, whereas the normal resources completely deplete. So those you need to replace. But oil, it's pretty cool. It's kind of a cool dynamic. Was in some point of the game, oil is quite sparse, and then in the end, it actually becomes the cheapest resource.
Yeah, it does. All right, I'm looking around. I'm trying to think of some more stuff to ask. A lot of this just goes over my head. It's unbelievable.
I want to ask a little bit about the wall. I kind of want to ask him to poke around with this nuclear setup and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I was looking at this nuclear setup earlier.
Yeah, just give it a little chat.
So yeah, there's two things that I used. The first one is with the heat pipes. That's pretty much Mojo's nuclear build. The basic idea, as you can see, is that you use the heat exchangers directly to the turbines, so you're not wasting UPS on the pipes for steam. But then eventually I converted to the reactors used as heat pipes built on the right of the first lake, because Elizen said, so it's probably true, that it's twice as UPS efficient.
I believe it.
I believe that.
Oh yeah, I believe it.
It's quite possible. So I started using these when I felt like I could actually use some UPS, and the reactors actually became kind of cheap enough. And then I just did the same in the second lake. I have a blueprint book of like 4 stages. So, actually I lost it somewhere. I don't know where I put it. I lost it recently. But basically I have like 4 stages. So first I placed the landfill, then I placed the offshore pumps, then I placed the rest of the landfill, because this build relies on it, that it actually landfills the offshore pumps in. It's a very smart build. It's not my build. Somebody else who figured it out on the forums stole it and then edited it to my own thing. But this idea is from somebody. I find it smart. That you put the offshore pump down, then you landfill it, and that means that you can build the turbines basically in the same bounding box where the water normally be. That's really cool. By the way, it still works with the new offshore pump. I tested it. So yeah. And then the rest of nuclear was quite standard. It's just, it's expensive, but eventually it's fine. And then you just feed it to fuel cells. And it didn't take that long to build it.
Yeah.
And you still got some old ones running. This must have been maybe not the first. Oh, he got disconnected. So V's out. So Xterminator, we're gonna have to fill in.
All right. Yeah,
Looks
so
like he's got some old ones.
yeah, this looks much older than the other ones that are on an island. Let's see here. Yeah, definitely older. The amount this like pump spaghetti is pretty crazy.
Yes. That was a day's work right there.
Oh yeah,
This is oh, it's a masterpiece of pump spaghetti.
it really is. This. Oh my goodness.
And then like he had no reservation to just chop out the northwestern portion of the nuclear plant, the westmost nuclear plant, because it was in the way for something else more important. So he just chopped it up. He just literally just took a piece out of it.
Yep. No regard
love
for
that.
it. It's such an interesting play style. I mean, I just can't play with like this, so it just blows me away.
I think if you put your mind to it, Exterminator, you could do it. You just have to really focus on squeezing everything in and challenging yourself. I don't know if I could do it though. I think you could do it. I can't do it.
I don't know if I can. I would have to really try. I mean,
I believe.
thanks. So you mentioned these walls. It looks like he's just using pure laser turrets here. 3 rows of them. Wow.
Yeah, he's actually using, I think I saw in one case, a single row. But the question is always, hey, how did you feel about the wall? And part of that's my personal agenda, right? You
Yeah.
know, against the wall, right? We all have our opinions of the Great Wall. But also, I'm just curious how he approached it,
Mm-hmm.
like what that looks like. He's got layers of walls you can see. He's got older walls deeper on the inside. If you look like right here, that it's got that history element to it, you know, and he's using the cliffs as well, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
You can even see these. Some of them have kills, hundreds of them.
Oh yeah.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Now?
I got him back in.
I have no idea what happened, but well, I'm back. So what did I say last that actually hurt?
I think we were talking about the walls. We admired your pipe
Oh, yeah.
spaghetti and what you linked,
Yeah.
and that was amazing.
Yeah.
And then we're just kind of wondering about the wall situation, because you have a couple layers of walls. It looks very historical.
Yes.
The inside, and then the middle, and then
Mhm.
the outside. So did you
Yes.
extend those walls like every day
Yeah.
a little bit, or?
Yeah, over time, because you know you get the artillery outposts there, and then they shoot out the fighters, and then you can see the resources, and then you scout out some more, and then you build the next wall. So that was kind of the process. So it's just layer by layer by layer as the base expanded, and then again, like I didn't really have a reason to remove it, mostly because I don't actually have a trash system like you do in them, so they can't really deconstruct themselves, and they are full of artillery shells. So if I actually try to deconstruct them myself, it's a huge pain because it just fills my inventory immediately. And that's one of the things that I really like about the whole shells logistics, because if I want to deconstruct this, it means that I have to invent a trash system solution.
I'll be
And that's
back.
the great part, because I need to actually go think. And that's really nice.
Or you got to fire all the shells.
Yeah, or you nuke it, which...
Yeah, nuking it. I feel like nuking it is not in the spirit of cleaning up. I've done it
but...
times though.
Yeah, but also, like, it kind of loses the point, right? If you're trying to reconstruct it, it's because you're trying to save the resources, and if you're nuking it, not only are you spending the nuke, but you're also destroying what's there, so there's no much
Heresy.
point.
There's a lot of heresy. So I love that you have the at the artillery station. You have the oil. So you got is it barrels of light oil being distributed for the flamethrower turrets. I'm a big fan. I like mixing them because it's fun, right? Not because it's effective, because it's fun.
Honestly, it's because it's effective.
It's effective too, but it's really fun.
The laser turrets aren't enough. Like, if you get a huge horde of behemoths that the artillery basically summons, the laser turrets get wrecked, like, quite easily, very often. Or they have, like, really huge losses. They probably don't, like, lose completely, but they lose a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So the flamethrowers really help. Like, right now, it doesn't seem like it. They feel kind of redundant. But if I built another artillery outpost, it would get a lot of biter attention.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I had a version of this that didn't have the flamethrower turrets, and yeah, I actually deliberately went and added them at some point. Not in this map. This actually is the one blueprint that I have from my previous save. I don't think there's actually many others. Basically, everything else is just built in this base. But yeah, I had the previous version that did try to go without flamethrower turrets, and it didn't do very well. And I like this dynamic quite a bit as well, because the flamethrower turret is quite powerful when you get it first, and then it kind of becomes inconvenient, right? Because you would have to pipe the things everywhere. So you kind of stop using it, then you start using laser turret en masse, and then eventually the flamethrower turret kind of becomes useful again because of the masses of biters that come to artillery. And that's really cool. So it's not like a one-dimensional thing that's like, okay, the flamethrower is useful when you unlock it, and then never again.
Yeah, it definitely is. It does scale decently into the late game, I've noticed.
Man, it's actually kind of stupid how well it does, but
Yeah, it really does. It's so powerful.
It is. Yeah, it is. I also like how gun turrets return as well with the uranium ammo.
Oh yes, the gun turrets can be so good.
So cool.
Yes. I can't generally get myself to do that. In fact, I don't think this base produces uranium ammo. In general, I like to have it, even for myself, because when I build rails, you can shoot a tree very quickly with C, whereas you would have to put down the rail from your cursor with Q, mine the trees, or even deconstruct them, and then take the rail back. Whereas if you shoot it, you don't have to remove the rail from your cursor. So it's like a small, nice thing. But if you have the submachine gun and the uranium rounds, you clear the trees really quickly. So in this case, I didn't really need it, but usually I do that.
I had someone in chat ask how many rocket silos you have.
I think 7.
7? Okay, wow.
I think so. Well, as you can see on the left hand, for example, at some point I doubled the builds, so they are joined together and mirrored, which is actually kind of cool as well. But
that is cool.
It is 2 silos combined. So even though I have these builds, I have 2 of these doubles, and then I have 1, 2, 3 of the separate ones, so 7 in total.
Very cool.
And again, they should be about 400 science a minute each. So it's 2.8-ish something.
Wow. I like also that you've, I know it's just part of the style, but that you've left a lot of the cliffs in the base.
Yeah, some got removed, but
yeah, some of course, but I know a lot of people, including myself, would have just gone wild with the cliff explosives.
Yes. I actually feel kind of uneasy with the construction planner whenever I get close to, or even pressing shift to, ghost place things, because it automatically removes the cliffs. And I really don't want to do that, but especially as it's irreversible. But sometimes I just accidentally did, and sometimes I did actually reload an autosave to prevent that from happening, and sometimes I just didn't bother. So
that's reverse OCD.
Yeah.
It's too orderly. I just gotta go back to chaos.
Yep.
Well, it's just a valid fun restriction. It's nice that they're there. They look really nice, and they give it some really cool shape sometimes. So I really like cliffs. They're really nice. But yeah, sure. Sometimes I just deconstruct them as well. Sometimes it's just way too much.
I think
not all of them, but the ones that I need to.
I think Xterminator found an old outpost.
Yeah.
Still lingering.
Nothing
here. Train that's just waiting.
Yeah, it's actually the first ever stone outpost.
Wow.
Yeah. See, I'm having troubles with this. I'm getting a little triggered by.
Yeah, I would.
Oh man, it just feels so good to clean these up.
Yeah, it just scratches that itch.
Need, right?
I couldn't resist.
Yeah. And there's just like laser turrets here because this was actually the perimeter at some point.
Yeah, I love the history.
Yeah, it's
I
just
really
like
the history.
these relics left in here.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why I could build this quite quickly, right? Because I just don't bother with the past and I just look forward and extend the bottlenecks instead of cleaning up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because this would take a while to clean up.
Well, yeah, now.
There is a lot of history at this point. Well, sure, now, but if you did it over time, it would probably be even more time if you combined that separate time. So, you know, it saves a lot of time not to have to worry about these things.
That is true.
It is true. It's very wise words.
Yes, so much time can be spent on deconstruction.
Yeah. There's even, if you watch the latest speedrun, and let me give a quick shout out to Happy Dude for sub 2 hours and
Yeah.
80%. You can
Yeah, that
still
thing's
see,
nuts. Yeah.
you can still see, and I'm going to be a critic for just a moment, so everyone, I know this is rude, but he will place an extra belt somewhere on accident, and
Yeah.
he can't stop himself from cleaning it up. He can't.
Yeah, everybody does.
Yeah,
this.
even though it
I've heard
takes
from
time,
Montreal
right?
Elite as well.
There's no purpose to cleaning it up. It just wastes time, but it's just everyone is just so ingrained,
Yes.
so programmed to clean it up.
Yes, very much so. I do that as well. Like, I'm not that savage that I would leave little pieces of accidental belt like lying somewhere. I do deconstruct that as well. But to be fair, for the most of my playing time, unlike a speedrunner, I actually do have the, you know, the personal robot ports, and it basically takes a split second to remove these things. So for a speedrunner who spends, you know, half of the playthrough by building manually and the second half with only construction robots that obviously are still somewhat limited because you can't just go full crazy with them,
Yeah.
then the situation is a
I'll
bit
be
different,
back.
but still I'm not that savage about it.
Well, I might have to wrap things up on my end. Is there anything
That's
else
right.
you want to cover here in the next couple of minutes?
I think that's pretty much it. Here where we're standing is like, this is basically the artillery explosives production, both the refineries on the right and then the explosives on the left.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a little special one, but we've basically been here already, so it's not something new, and it just goes in the same theme as all the other things, so it's not that special.
Although, to be honest, I'm not sure I noticed this before because I'm just
Yeah.
like so lost all the time. I don't even know if I've been here before or not.
One of the other cool things about the mod specifically is the implementation, because a year ago when I was writing it, or well, more than a year at this point, the machines couldn't have their own productivity. Nowadays they can. You can actually mod in productivity for a machine without any modules.
Oh.
Or beacons, so they can actually have it by themselves. Or at least I'm pretty sure about that. I saw the pull request being merged, but I didn't actually try it. And the thing is that then I needed to solve it some way that I need to boost the machine with the productivity, but I can't really give it a speed bonus anymore because it already has a high speed by itself, or I can't reduce it because, you know, the multiplication would be way too imprecise because I'm already increasing these numbers so much. So what I needed to do is that I needed to add these special black full speed productivity modules. But then the issue would be that I could put these full speed modules that just don't reduce the crafting speed into the normal assembly machine 3 and beacon it and get a much better result, which is not what I wanted. Like, a part of this mod, or part of the reasoning is I don't want to be restricting myself to use the inferior solution. So, like, for example, if I were restricting myself to not use beacons in a normal game, then it feels inferior, right? Because you're deliberately fucking yourself up. It's like,
Yeah.
why? If you could do better in the game. So in this case, what I did was that I basically inflated the value of the modules so that they produce in pairs, and the beaconed machines have double module slots. So you can put them into the standard assembly machine 3 and beacon them and get probably a decent result, but you're only going to get the half the amount of productivity, which is a huge deal.
Yeah,
you really don't want to sacrifice the productivity of all things.
Oh, yeah.
That's smart. That's clever.
And that was pretty cool because also there's the side effect that before I was using even the first tier of the beacon machines because I went like through 1 to 3 over time because it's just so expensive to use all the tier 3 modules that you just can't go straight into it. And in my opinion, when you can, it's just really, really tedious, and in my opinion, it's a trap. But basically, I was using SM Machine 3s with these tier 3 full speed productivity modules, which was really cool because the SM Machine 3s just worked on their own. They didn't need any beacons. They did give me the extra productivity, even though just 20%. And it was quite nice. It was different, but it worked really well. And then eventually I could get the full double productivity when I actually did apply the beacon machines into them. But of course, then I needed a lot of power for the drain and for the other consumption when it's actually running. And I needed to actually produce all the beacons and the modules. So it took a while, but it was a really nice process. So it's not just about, oh yeah, the base is full in the end. The process of like playing with the mod was actually quite fun too.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I can recommend it. Like if you want to do something similar, even though if you don't want to do a base like this, that's as spaghetti and stuff, then it's a pretty cool mod. It really tries to work very similarly as vanilla, and it's quite close.
Yeah, I think it's great. I got one last question, then maybe wrap it up after. There's a right here. Let me ping it. There's the last a steam engine. Now, for whatever reason, you have 10 boilers and 4 steam engines in a line, and I'm looking at it, and this looks like something I would have seen in a brand new player who didn't understand how to even make a power plant. So there's got to be a story, right? There's got to be a story.
Of course there is. Of course there was 20 steam engines.
What is this?
Oh, there were more before you just tore them up?
Well, yeah, exactly. I just needed more the stone bricks over the walls and then the nuclear processing. And yeah, of course there was a full power plant in here.
Okay, all right.
You can probably see it in the time-lapse video if you were paying close attention, but I'm not sure if it's visible there. It might be. Actually, one cool things in this time-lapse video is that in like the second frame or something of the factory, the first steam engine build gets destroyed by biters, and it's caught there in the screenshot.
Default settings.
It's a nice detail, yeah.
Yeah. Xterminator knows all about that with his recent playthrough.
Oh yeah, for sure I do.
Especially with the, like, that I was trying to place down the blueprinted builds. It really isn't efficient, especially if you're trying to cover the area to defend yourself as well, and at the same time build it all and actually focus on defenses. And let's face it, I didn't focus on defenses. So
Yeah.
It was a nice part.
This is I mean, this is just great. It's so apropos for the map. Like, yeah, there used to be a bigger steam engine setup, but I tore up the steam engines but left the extra boilers, even though they do nothing now.
Well,
I just love it.
I tore apart the parts that were offending, right? I tore the parts where I needed space. Doesn't mean all of it.
Yeah.
And then later you supplied it with coal from a train.
I mean, it's still
Yeah.
with all of almost 4 megawatts. Come on, it's doing something. It's not useless.
Yeah, it can power, maybe a quarter of one of these machines or something.
Yeah, well, that's probably much less. Yeah, well, something like that.
I'm glad you spotted that, Rain. That was it's a good story.
There's probably a bunch of these over the place, but yeah, this one's special.
And then you had to build the Covarex processing buffer right next to it to make it feel bad. To make it to make this old power plant look over and see, oh my god,
look what he's doing.
Shiny rocks in this chest that have
he's forgotten me.
I didn't think about it like that, but now that you say it, that's quite hilarious. Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah, I was actually at the point at some stage because my setup for the Covarex enrichment didn't work perfectly. There was some condition that I was missing, and something got filled up. I don't know if it was probably the U238, the non-rich one, and it was quite late in the game. I think it's actually the spike, the 5 hours ago, or one of them, because I actually started to run out of power, like seriously a lot, because I just didn't have the enriched things. and to enrich more things, I needed more power. So standard situation. But then I had to improve it, and I had to add a lot of the enriched or these centrifuges in here in the bottom left on the island. So that's actually fairly recent construction in terms of, like, let's say the last 10-15 hours. And I had to beacon them as well to really make them as quick as possible because I really needed the resource right then. That was pretty cool.
Oh yeah. All right. I think, yeah, I definitely gotta head out, myself at least.
I think we pretty much covered what we needed to.
Yeah. This has been fantastic. Wow. Thank you so much for showing this to us. And Rain, I'm
You're welcome.
really glad you were able to join.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, this has been fantastic. I think this is now I want to say the 3rd or 4th base of yours I've toured, and each time I'm so impressed. It's just like, especially now with this mod, because you removed the hindrance of beacons, it just spaghettifies it even more, and I love it.
It just means that I can spend all of the time or most of the time building actually in the spaghetti factory. Because like the previous one, for example, I had to outsource most of the production because I had like 1.4k signs a minute, and 1,000 of that was in the outsourced beacon build outside of the main cluster. So obviously I could spend much less time actually building the main cluster. But this way I can actually spend just more time doing the interesting parts and not the beacon parts. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And one last thing,
yeah.
per usual, under the logo, there is a junction.
There's a junction?
Of all things. Yeah, there's belts under it, see?
Oh yeah, and there's pipes.
Yeah,
I see pipes. Of course.
Yeah, the pipes give it away with the out mode. Yeah. It's just a small thing for the end.
Is that a belt of speed 3s?
It is.
And
good lord.
Oh my god. And it's, I don't know how long this is, but oh my goodness.
Yeah, it goes all the way to the assemblers that actually produce the beacon.
That is a lot of belt buffer.
That's an expensive belt right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whew. Alright, well, awesome. I'm gonna head out. Thanks again. It was so great. It was a joy, a lot of fun. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Alright, guys, that's gonna do it here. I just left the voice chat, so I'm just with you guys now. I just want to say thanks, everyone, for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. The stream footage for this will go on YouTube. I tried recording it separately, but it was just too much. This is a very computer-heavy base, performance-wise, but I will upload the VOD to YouTube, and yeah, I think that's gonna do it. I will stream tomorrow, hopefully about like 12:30 or 1 my time, you know, normal-ish Saturday time. We will be doing the Death World, returning there for the last stream of February, and we're gonna be hit instantly since we had Black Ops sub and then Shoop gifting 3 subs as well. Those are queued up and should hit me right when I log in, as well as the bits. So thank you guys so much for that. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your night. Thanks for stopping by. And I think... yeah, I think that's going to do it. Let me just check this out here. Yeah, I think I'm going to call it there. Take care, guys. And I will see you all tomorrow for some more Death World, where we finally get to use our artillery train we've been working on for the last couple streams. I'm super excited. We'll see how many times I die. Anyway, I'll take care. Bye-bye.